What's up, guys? Dr. Gabrielle Lyon here with longtime mentor, best friend, Dr. Donald Layman. And we really aim to bring you some of the most updated and unbiased information that we can. And in fact, when we have those biases, we'll share them with you. And our topic of conversation today is about longevity. And in the Twitter world, which Don was laughing yesterday, has gone crazy with this concept of longevity and lowering protein to help with longevity, which actually you can tell we've been friends for so long because it really bothered me. And what you're hearing in the narrative is interesting because you're hearing individuals talk about why we should, or at least pose the argument that we should lower animal protein and protein in general to dampen mTOR's response over time, right? Not, you don't want to overstimulate mTOR, otherwise this shortens your life somehow. And the way in which to do this is to actually lower protein. Did I miss anything in this argument? I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole bunch of things and angles that, bother me in the Twitter world where you only have a few characters to try and present a complex thing. But I mean, I think it's clear that overeating shortens longevity. And so most of the research that's quoted is really animal research, and animals that are in cages in sterile environments and presented food around the clock ad libitum basically eat around the clock. Which, humans eat meals. And so that's the worst case scenario. And we know that if you restrict calories or you restrict protein to animals, they will tend to live longer. And people have interpreted that as somehow restricting protein is important. But the reality is we're preventing overeating.
Right.
And we all know obesity shortens lifespan. So that's one of my biggest problems with it. But then the other big problem is people who are kind of tweeting about it aren't getting into, well, lower protein, what does that mean? Give me the number. What do you think is healthy? And I think you and I have talked, and you see in your practice that the average American is actually under eating protein.
Right. And what the average female has around 68 grams of protein?
Yeah, the average adult female is right at the RDA. In fact,
which is 0.8 grams per kilogram. I'm sure that our listeners are used to that number, but yeah.
The average female, in fact, the NHANES data, our national survey for food, suggests that 40% of women over 60 are actually under the RDA, which means that's the minimum to prevent a deficiency. So 40% are too low. So this constant message that protein's too high simply isn't true. The average American adult, above 18, the average intake in the US falls between 0.9 and 1. And what we know from research is that almost all the research data points to the healthy range is 1.2 to about 1.6. And so the Americans are way below that range. Even if you look at the Mediterranean diet, which is supposed to be healthy, it's almost 30% higher in protein than the average American diet.
And one could, not you, because actually we should talk about your personal protein goals for the day, which are lower than what I typically recommend. But there's always some room for variability, that if what we know to be healthy is 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram, which we do know that. And in the PRODAGE study, there's a lot of data on this. This is not new. This is important, but not new. The RDA, which we can all agree is too low when we're thinking about optimization, not just disease prevention. The next step above that would be optimizing for even higher protein. Is there a downside to go, say, to 2.2 grams per kilogram? And I would say no. So that's 1 gram per pound body weight. For some people that can be high, but
I agree with that. I think that you have to look at your goal with the protein choice. We know that from a muscle and body standpoint, we seem to optimize muscle development is somewhere around 1.6 to maybe 1.8. To go above that, then you need to question why. We know that to build muscle, the primary issue is resistance exercise. It's exercise. You can't make your muscles bigger just by eating more protein.
Don't tell Shane that.
Plenty of reason to believe
Right.
that. However, as you go above that, the question is, what calories do you want to eat? Do you want to eat more fat, more carbs, or more protein? They have different metabolic outcomes.
Right.
So, if you want to have 2.2, you're now trading out calories of either fat or carbohydrate. And that metabolically may be exactly what you want to do. But to convince yourself that that's going to build more protein in your muscle, that's simply not true. It might make your liver bigger or your kidney bigger, or your
which is not necessarily a bad thing, though. This doesn't mean that.
I mean, it may increase your lean body mass, but it won't increase your muscle mass.
It will increase your lean body mass, which people will use interchangeably. Lean body mass and skeletal muscle mass, which actually are different, but they're often used interchangeably. So the next question then becomes preference. And I think there is something to be said for carbohydrates tend to beget more carbohydrates, and same with fat. There is a way in which we eat that tends to be highly palatable. Can you control for calories and still eat fat and carbohydrates? Totally. Yeah. Is it more challenging because of the satiety mechanisms or their lack thereof when it comes to carbohydrates? I think if you are not really, really tracking and really not careful, there's a tendency to overeat carbohydrates and fats, period.
I mean, carbohydrates, I think, are incredibly misunderstood. If you really look at the metabolism, the body needs around 80 to 100, 120 grams per day. We have an RDA set at 130 grams per day, which is kind of a big safety factor. But the average American is eating 300. I mean, so we've got nearly 200 grams of excess energy of carbohydrate energy coming in. And I'm pretty convinced that that's a major cause of obesity. As you and I've talked before, I sort of look at carbohydrates as a two-step need. The first step is kind of basic metabolism for the brain and red blood cells, which is what gives us that kind of RDA number. And then the other is how much for exercise. People who do really intense exercise tend to feel better with carbohydrates during that period. You burn carbohydrates, and so you either have to convert protein to it or you have to eat the carbs. And I personally feel better eating the carbs. And so,
which you always have.
I always have. And so I eat probably 160 to 200, somewhere in that range of carbohydrates per day. But again, the average American's eating 300. I'm exercising an hour and a half a day of tennis or intense exercise, HIIT type of exercise. So I burn those carbs.
Right. The conversation of reducing protein to have more longevity seems really ridiculous when you think about, here you are very youthful in your, do I dare say? I won't say. Very, very youthful. And one of the reasons that you've been able to maintain this vitality is that you've been training, and you've been training your whole life, and you do have a diet that is robust in protein. And this concept that we should then lower protein and that's somehow going to improve longevity is incredibly short-sighted. The idea of longevity equaling health is totally not true and not in alignment. Your mother lived to be 103, 102.
Yeah.
We all know towards the end of life what that looks like. I mean, and if you don't yet, you will. It's rough. Yeah. The idea that you are going to live longer without the discussion of the quality of life, of being able to do activities of daily living, of being able to be mobile, of being able to just stand up from a chair. Totally miss those conversations when you tell people to reduce protein for this conversation of longevity. It's a mistake. It's the biggest mistake that I've seen. And I'm a trained geriatrician. So there you go.
You and I agree on that, that the quality of life really relates to your muscle health. You know, we like the term muscle-centric health because basically if your muscles are healthy, your movement, your activities of daily life, but also your metabolic health. How do you metabolize carbohydrates? How do you metabolize fats? Those all relate to your muscle health.
Right.
And, people who live past 60, really their quality of life depends on their muscle health. It's not an issue of, I always like to say, you may live longer, but you don't get more years in your 30s. You get your years in the 90s and 100. And those aren't necessarily very high quality of living.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm not sure why. Do you have a sense of why we have other PhDs and some of the influencers saying that they should reduce protein for longevity? It's weird. And I don't think that all of them are anti-animal. So it's just this weird, I don't quite understand it. Do you have any idea?
Well, I think you're right that there is a significant component of them that lean vegetarian.
Okay.
And so it's very hard to have a vegetarian diet at 1.8 grams per kg.
Right.
I mean, you have to go to a diet that is full of highly processed foods to do that. You can't do it with just natural foods. And so we tend to confuse the issue of having a healthy plant-based diet, which I would argue you and I have very healthy plant-based diets, but we also have relatively high protein diets. I don't think those are mutually exclusive.
Right.
So there is that faction. I think the other issue that sort of has been out there forever is sort of an international malnutrition issue. And that globally, the World Health Organization looks at the lowest common denominator. And so all of the protein guidelines are really set for malnutrition in poor countries.
Right.
So nobody wants to recommend a level that is 1.8 grams per kg because those countries probably could never meet it.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah. On the other hand, we need to have guidelines that are relevant to the way people live in those environments. So if we struggle to get to 1 or even 0.9 grams in a country in Africa, that's a meaningful issue. But in the United States, where overeating is a health issue, 1.6 grams per kg may be the most healthy thing we can do. So, we have to be sensitive to the environment we live in to try and optimize the diet.
Yes. What would your response be to some of these people that are saying that they should reduce protein for longevity? That's like saying you should reduce muscle mass for longevity.
Yeah, I just don't buy it. And my first response then is, what level do you mean? I mean, do you mean 0.7 grams per kg? Should we be starving? I mean, what level? We're currently 0.9. Reduce it from what? And that's my problem is they throw out this term that protein is bad or you should reduce it, but they don't follow it up with a number. Give me a number and I'll give you the science to either back your number or destroy your number. And that's
can you guys imagine being mentored by this guy?
That's why they don't give you a number, is because once you go beyond the generality of, oh, wow, protein's bad, then you have to defend your number and you're going to lose that argument.
Right. It's a good point. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this little snippet talking about protein and longevity. And again, don't forget, muscle is your organ of longevity. And, now I have to change my tagline. Now that's it. Now I have to change my tagline. It can't be about longevity anymore. It has to really be about the quality of life. Oh, well, you guys, I'll have to get back to you all on a new tagline. Please, if you like this video, like it, subscribe, share it. We do our best to provide great content for you. And if there's something that you want to learn about, please go ahead and email me. You just have to respond to my newsletter And if you're not on my newsletter, you should be, and that you can find on my website and also comment below.